I may have told you before the story of the curé Vaz, who was, as was his wont, in the confession box, and this young man appeared. This young man, had arrived the previous day with a friend of his, and they were sleeping in the local auberge, and the other one was sleeping fast, but the one who was the topic of this story woke up, and he heard around midnight an angelic choir. He was greatly puzzled and got up and opened the window to see what was going on. And indeed it was objective. There was a most beautiful angelic choir in the air. Eventually he got back to sleep. And what was not his surprise when the curé Vaz started off with, "Did you hear the angels singing last night?" Indeed I did. Now, the curé Vaz knew the reason for it. He knows more than we do, but he did let this on. At that point in time, the greatest sinner on earth was being converted. We don't know who it was, and it probably wasn't anywhere near Ars itself. But there was a point in time when a soul was returning from non-grace to grace, from darkness to light, from being wounded to being in a state of inner joy and peace, from being lost, if he should die at that point, to being eternally saved. All around us there are souls who perhaps are in that state. We are rubbing shoulders, rubbing souls with people who are in a state of darkness. And should they die, we do not know where they will end up. While meditating quietly before the Blessed Sacrament this morning, I picked this up, which is with the other two of this trilogy of Pope Benedict, in my oratory. And this passage caught my eye. It starts off with the mention of the way in which the world was created. All with one word, fiat, let it be. A thought which became fact, and we were in that thought. Now he quotes here Cardinal Newman. In the meantime, says the Pope, an idea of Cardinal John Henry Newman may suffice. Newman once said that while God could create the world out of nothing at all, that is, with just one word, he could overcome men's guilt and suffering only by bringing himself into play, by becoming in his Son a sufferer who carried this burden and overcame it through his self-surrender. The overcoming of guilt has a price. And by the way, Padre Pio, now Saint Pio, was not happy about the easy distribution of grace, notably in absolution without condition, without any kind of demand of amendment. He used to speak about dishing out, banding about the precious blood too cheaply. We must put our heart, or better, our whole existence on the line. And even this act is insufficient, says Newman. It can become effective only through communion with the one who bore the burdens of us all. Which leads me to the point I would like to develop for a few minutes this morning. I mentioned souls in a state of darkness. They are souls who, without knowing it quite often, are colluding with their enemy. The devil, the original fallen angel who hates us and wants us for his kingdom, out of envy and spite. Now, the whole battlefield of handling hand to hand the enemy of the soul and of mankind is serious stuff. Those who have been involved with this ministry know that this power, which wishes our harm and our eternal harm, is extremely powerful. Powerful not only physically, but intellectually. This enemy of the soul, with all his satellites, about a third of the angels, fallen, that is, knows how to attack. His and their strategy is perfect. In one case of exorcism, this devil, who turned out to be Beelzebub, was asked, "How is it that you're here and not Satan himself?" And he was obliged to answer the truth. "I am here by his order." And this devil was again questioned, "Does that mean that you do everything in obedience?" And that was precisely the case. He was obliged to admit there's a perfect order. As there is in the heavenly choirs, so too in the infernal choirs. Order and perfect obedience. Replicated on earth. And you know what I mean, don't you? Look at Ireland right now. Even yesterday, when there were well over 50,000 in that vigil in Dublin, on the internet report of RTE, that was brought down to 15,000. Does that sound familiar? There's a huge strategy going on, and we can't see it. Perfectly orchestrated. The devil wants blood. Now, a soul which returns to grace is a huge victory for the angels who are trying all the time to warn us. But what we don't realize is this. The Lord had a project of intimacy and bliss even in this world for those redeemed souls. And this is the bit that even the redeemed hugely miss. I've shown you this before. It's the book written on venial sin, which we allow to pass. But what we don't realize is that every time we consent and do not even handle things which are wounding our God, we are in that category of people who just want to get there. And they're missing the point of the adventure, of intimacy, love, and yes, rest. Because there is no rest unless there is peace of heart. And there is no peace of heart if we are not in harmony with the will that is trying to handle us. I have a lot to do with the travelling community. They'll travel miles and miles from Galway and counties on the other side of Ireland to get a blessing, to ask for healing or whatever. I've had actually now in the last 9 months to not have their mobile phone switched on because the number's gone round. But I am noticing a pattern emerging, and it might apply to you as well. This going miles and miles for a blessing. Yes, many too will go to confession, even many young people, and that's actually encouraging to see these young travelling people still with enough faith to want confession spontaneously. But, and it's a big but, and I'd ask you to ask yourself whether you're in this but. It's a cop-out to want the cosmetics of a blessing without coping itself with sin. Not that long ago, I had a nice young couple of travelling people before me opening up their heart. And at one point of the conversation, they came out with this, something along these lines. We were involved recently with not one, but 2 Gardaí chases. And the details they came out with were something like the best of James Bond. Lose them! I can't go any faster. Lose them! Put your foot down. Lose them! Go that way. And off they went into a bog and lost them in the bog while the Gardaí went flying on a tangent, not knowing where they got to. And yet they were coming for a blessing. Translate that into your terms. Are you copping out? Are you perhaps now and again throwing sand in the Godhead's eyes with lots and lots of prayers, and yet not blinking an eyelid before using the holy name, before hurting your partner in either marriage or in school? Things which are never handled until death, without mentioning the hours that go into empty conversation over Guinness if you're a man or coffee if you're a woman. Not mentioning the £20 notes going rolled up in the form of cigarettes, never handed over, because the will holds that little bit for itself. I just finished, my friends, with one thing. That love and intimacy once found pacifies us not just for ourselves and our relationship with Him, but has repercussions all round. A peaceful soul in grace loves all around. Since I've got on to these 2, you know that they had different tendencies on certain levels, Newman and Manning. But I've been discovering recently this hidden gem of Manning. Newman, of course, became Cardinal himself and the founder of a great movement in Britain, the Oratory, a great theologian and probably a future doctor of the Church. He did not have patience with some tendencies of Manning, and he's known to have muttered one day beneath his breath, "Manning, Manning, I have confidence in Manning a quarter of an hour after his death." But this Manning, I've discovered recently, is a hidden gem of sanctity. Goodness itself for the poor, even though he was of Oxford breeding. And do you know that after his death, when they were unpeeling him, they found around his neck what? A locket of whom? The young Mrs. Manning, who was an Anglican he had married and loved intensely. And for him, there was no contradiction between the 2 loves. He was a man of love, and therefore able to act. And the cortege at his funeral in Westminster was so huge that the people acclaimed him popularly a saint of God. 2 men, very different, but switched on by the same grace, working itself out in goodness. And by the way, Newman too, in his own way, did it. Do you know why? After his death, they found lots and lots of doctors who had receipts from Newman for the poor who could never pay for their treatment. So let's get it straight, my friends. Grace is concrete, grace is tender, and grace on every level is healing.